Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's City Council study session for Monday, May 9th, 2022. We have 4 items on the agenda for tonight. Up first is going to be an update on the economic development strategy. This is going to be Director of Community Development Brad Power, Economic Development Manager Darren Hollingsworth, and consultants with Economic and Planning Systems, Inc. to present and discuss an overview and update on the economic development strategy. Good evening.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of City Council. Darren Hollingsworth, Economic Development Manager. We're here this evening to provide an update on the Strategic Economic Development Plan, where we are in that process. This is the first of 3 interactions with City Council. And this evening, we are accompanied by the consultant that's helping the city through this process, Economic and Planning Systems, Inc., accompanied by Mr. Dan Gimond and Mr. Brian Duffany. They'll be providing an update this evening and be happy to respond to any questions that council has as well. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. In the middle. All right, how about that? Perfect, thanks. Thanks for the introduction, Darren. Just a little bit about us. We're based in downtown Denver. We have a staff of about 12 people in our office there. We're an economic and land use consulting firm. We work in a number of areas and that allows us to take a broad multidisciplinary view of all of our assignments. So real estate economics and economic development are a big part of our work. We do a lot of work on transportation planning as well, economic impact analysis. Housing policy has been a large part of our practice for a long time and is especially important these days. And that's us. We're happy to be here. We're appreciative of the opportunity. I wanted to just start out with a little bit of context on how we look at economic development. We take a broad view of it, looking at the community development aspects of it, as well as the sort of business and workforce aspects of it. This slide sort of lays out the theory of place-based economic development, where you need good quality of life, adequate housing, good infrastructure, good transportation, all those things that make a place a nice place to live and to own or run a business. And so that's an important piece of this. And I think that's consistent with a lot of what the city's been doing to date on economic development. And then layer over that the sort of why are we here and some of the organizational aspects of this. The city works with about 11 economic development partners, and from what we're hearing, they're working very well together. But we're just ensuring that everybody has what they need and looking for areas where there could be either better collaboration or just gaps in what's not being addressed. I think we're also working to come up with a working definition of economic development. What does it mean for this community? And we want to hear your input on that towards the end of this slide deck. It's also really a changing environment, right? We just are coming out of this pandemic. The city's got a recent comprehensive plan, right? And so we want to, I really like the way Darren has phrased this with us. We want to be relevant, right? We've got kind of a changing market, changing economy, changing demographics, and we just want to be relevant for the future and make sure what we're doing today is setting us up for success later. We put a big focus in our work on giving our clients an action plan. So it's not, we start with broader strategies, and then we're going to give Darren and his team a list of short and long-term actions that can serve as a work plan going forward. So there's a lot of engagement that we're doing as part of this project. We're working very closely with a steering committee comprised of, can I count, these 4 members, right? So we have the 3 external and 4 city. 3 external and 4 city, thanks, Dan. So we have the EDDA, we have the Chamber, the Aurora South Metro SBDC, and then Darren, Brad, Dan Paremba, and Nancy Fenton. So they're sort of our core project management or steering committee that we're working with throughout this, engaging with them regularly. And then our big push right now is a broader engagement, organized a little bit around what we call industry clusters or business types. We want to target downtown and South Broadway businesses, the medical cluster. We'd also like to get in touch with some of the industrial businesses, a large portion of the development in the southwest portion of the city. Real estate, so some brokers and developers. We're working on getting in touch with some people in that industry as well to understand, who wants to be here. What are some of the strengths and weaknesses of Englewood for location? And then there are all these partner organizations on the right side of the slide that the city works with. That we'll be going to them later after we've developed a little more framework of where we think this plan needs to go and get input from them. Later on in the plan, we will be doing a community survey. We'll be working on it's a little bit different than doing a comprehensive plan. We need to think a little bit about how we're gonna engage the public on the plan. City Council, which is you, we are here for our first check-in tonight. We expect to be with you probably 2 more times. I think we're thinking a mid-course check-in after we've done a lot of the engagement, and then towards the end when we've got a solid draft strategic plan to get your input on that as well. A couple initial observations, and then happy to take questions or comments and discussion. So we've been asking people what is economic development for Englewood, and it's been aligning well with the missions of the different groups we've talked to so far on our steering committee. It's the basic, probably the most commonly used definition. It's growing and retaining businesses and jobs, creating paths to wealth building, supporting entrepreneurship, and then the place-based aspect of it, creating a vibrant, safe, accessible place. Right? Some of the strengths and opportunities here, the location, centrally located in the South Metro area. You're on light rail, which is a really good amenity, easy access to all the major employment centers, whether it's by rail or by road here. People have consistently said a collaborative culture with the city, with the different partner organizations. We've heard that the city is good to work with. And then the newly formed EDDA, it has the ability to be proactive and take on some of these bigger infrastructure and placemaking needs. On the weaknesses or challenges, I think so far nothing really unusual that we would expect for a community of this size. It's built out, largely built out. So if there are large business or employer opportunities, we have to think about infill or redevelopment strategies to be able to accommodate those. Housing availability and costs, of course, that's a regional, statewide, and national issue right now. We're hearing a lot about the continued need for infrastructure and placemaking and safety improvements on Hampden, South Broadway, Old Hampden, around the medical center, and especially to help people with disabilities to get around this area more safely. Parking and accessibility on Broadway and in the Wellness District. Another either a challenge or an opportunity, some of the potentially the need for some larger events to help drive business, more large organized events to bring people in. Some emerging questions, because we're still really early in this study. Do we target large businesses or both? What's sort of the best business attraction strategy or niche for Englewood? What's the role of industrial development? Especially in areas where it's near transit and is under pressure to be converted to residential. Maybe some ideas on expanding support for entrepreneurs and new businesses, and then what is the role of the city in helping underserved or under-resourced businesses? And later on, once we've sort of figured out the direction of this from all the input we're going to get, we're going to look to other communities for best practices. See if there are other ideas out there that would apply to Englewood. And with that, we're happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Excuse me. Actually, I didn't catch your 2 names. If you could just...
I'm Dan.
Can you speak into the mic?
Sure. I'm Dan Guimond. I'm a principal with EPS.
Yep. Brian Duffany with EPS.
Thank you, Mr. Duffany. Perfect. Any questions from council? Does anyone want to get us started? Mayor Pro Tem.
I see parking mentioned as a factor in sort of the plan here. And a lot of communities have moved away from parking, or parking is becoming less common as part of the plan. What specifically would you describe as something we can explore relative to parking? I know the DDA has some ideas about parking. My one of the things that keeps me awake at night is that Inglewood turns into a new Rhino, which is a great place to be, but a terrible place to go. You can't park there, you can't drive there, or at least I can't. So what would we do about that situation?
Boy, you want to take that? That's a tough one.
You toss me the tough questions,
Yeah.
right, that you can't answer. I mean, parking is something to support the other uses in the community. I mean, we don't think parking is an end in and of itself. It was on the list of issues or constraints because it's been brought up that particularly as it relates to the South Broadway Business District, there are, the existing parking lots are pretty full, and to the extent that there's opportunities for business expansion, there's going to be a related issue and need for parking. The same could be said for the medical district. I mean, there you have a very clear case where there's been a significant expansion in employment and development in the medical district that is kind of stressing or the existing parking supply. So I think those are kind of ongoing, as Brian mentioned, infrastructure issues that the community's got to grapple with. But we see parking, and I should add for that matter that we know it's also an issue related to the city center redevelopment as well, that parking and paying for parking in that particular project is a financial challenge. So it's there, but we don't want it to be the sort of the driving factor of what the development is.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Member Russell.
So, thank you for being here this evening. And this falls along the lines of the Mayor Pro Tem's question. Does that mean you really don't have anything to do with the parking? That's our problem. You're going to work on the development. Is that really what that means?
No, I wasn't trying to imply that. I was trying to imply that that we are, I think, starting with two things. Brian explained at the very beginning that we do take a very holistic sort of community development and economic development approach to this. So we cannot ignore the infrastructure issues that are related to business development. And I think parking is certainly one of those issues that needs to be undertaken. I think it's very early in the process, and how the role that parking plays within the economic development plan is not totally clear to me at this point, as for instance related to what the EDDA, the Downtown Development Authority, might be doing in terms of its investment in infrastructure improvements. So I do think the plan itself is kind of an umbrella document that tries to look at overall economic development goals and priorities and be clear about what the investments are and what organizations are best equipped to undertake those. So parking may in fact be primarily the responsibility of the EDDA as opposed to some other aspect of the city.
Okay, so then I just have an overall question. Where are you getting your direction from? Are you getting your direction from city staff about what city staff wants and these current partners that we have now? Is that where most of the information is coming from?
The, Brian switched the slide to the steering committee there. I mean, our project manager is Darren Hollingsworth, who's the city's economic development manager. But we are basically working under the direction and guidance of this steering committee, which is comprised of the 4 city staff individuals shown at the bottom there, as well as the external partners being the EDDA director, the chamber director, and the SBDC director.
And then we are going to be doing broader outreach to businesses in Englewood to hear their perspective as well. So, you know, we're, I don't know if I would say we're taking direction. We're hearing input and trying to understand what the needs are, right? What the different partners should be doing to help to support economic development in the city.
Okay, and then also just, how do you weight current businesses in the city? I mean, in the whole mix of things.
Well, I think that's something to explore in this plan. I'll go back to my questions here. You know, what priorities or issues should we address? And I think something that comes up in a lot of economic development plans is, are you all about attraction and recruitment, or are you about supporting and growing existing businesses? In a lot of places, most economic growth comes from the expansion of existing businesses, right? And so I don't have an answer on that yet. That's what we're, I think, exploring.
I mean, we've certainly heard in our initial interviews with the stakeholder, with the steering committee, but we haven't reached out to the external organizations yet, but we have heard that Englewood has been very successful in its economic development efforts over the last 5 years, with an emphasis on existing business, with basically trying to support existing businesses as well as help smaller, help entrepreneurs and individuals get businesses started. So there's a very strong, I think, emphasis on supporting existing business and on small business development activities in the city. One of the questions on the table, I think, that has been raised is recognizing that is a priority of the city. Is there also an opportunity for reaching out to for opportunities for larger businesses in locations such as some of the opportunity sites that have been identified, as well as the city center project?
Okay, and actually, I would be interested in that also, because I do believe that we need some bigger businesses too. I mean, I do know currently the small businesses are our main bread and butter here with people with smaller employees, but you know, one of the problems that I think we've had for a while is there's really no place to shop here. I mean, how are we going to get people here if there's no place to shop is problematic also. And if we spend all of our money on restaurant and breweries and things like that, those things are cyclical, they go up and down. And I think that we need to look at places where people can shop and attract people here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Russell. I think City Manager Lewis, did you have something to add?
I did. Just to Member Russell, your question about who are they reporting to, ultimately, you have to accept this report. And so the questions that are on the screen now are really your kind of first shot, one of 3 opportunities that you'll have to weigh in. But I work at your direction, Brad works at my direction, Darren works at his direction, so you are in charge, and that's why we're here tonight. We'd love to have your feedback.
Member Noonan-Camp.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I am so excited about this project. And as Member Russell mentioned, our small business community is the backbone of the vitality of this city, and this is such an important project that I'm really thrilled about. I do have a couple of thoughts as you're soliciting feedback. One question I have, and this is something that we faced during the pandemic response, is the impact of home-based businesses in the community. So I do know that you're looking at entrepreneurial businesses, but the home-based piece, how does that play into who we are as a city, and what is the transition maybe from home-based to brick and mortar, and what is maybe an economic development organization's plan or role in that transition, and how can we support those businesses? I'm also curious, I saw in the way that you're breaking down stakeholder groups, it's mostly by geographic area, and I also wonder if there's an opportunity to break it down by business type. Different types of businesses in our community face different challenges. So, you know, restaurants and coffee shops are going to face a different challenges with some of the infrastructure we have here than other types of businesses. And then to remember Russell's point again, I'm really curious, what do we think we might be missing? Are there gaps in the kinds of businesses that we're currently attracting that we could be thinking about in a more strategic kind of long-term plan, which I think is the purpose of this. So I'm really excited to see that and excited to see your progress.
Thank you. What, maybe I'll take a crack at the easy one first. The idea of supporting people going from home-based to brick and mortar has come up. We don't have the answer yet, but that has come up in some of our initial discussions with the steering committee. That there are a lot of people doing some really innovative entrepreneurial things in their houses, and they need space to grow, and we need to look at ways to connect them and to help support their growth once they're ready to move to that next stage. So. And then as far as you're also asking about the business mix, like what else can we attract here? That's something we're definitely going to be looking into.
I think the list that we showed, you're right, was somewhat geographic, but we had also sort of identified the medical sector and the industrial sector and manufacturing as different sort of business groups. I don't know that this plan necessarily can get down to the level of breaking apart the South Broadway kind of businesses into restaurants versus breweries versus other kind of businesses. That might be a little too fine a grain split in terms of the groups we're talking to. But they're all good. They're all good questions about what's being successful and what's growing and what's being successful and what the best opportunities are.
Yeah, and most of these questions are for you to think about and, you know, discuss with your stakeholders.
Yeah, no,
but
they're great questions.
I understand not wanting to be too granular, but I think in a lot of the conversations that I have with the business owners in our community, they do face unique challenges based on what type of business they have. And so I'm curious, as a city, how do we respond to those and how do we take those into consideration when we're thinking strategically?
Great, thank you. Yeah, I mean, those and all of those kinds of questions are what we want to hear from you, so we know where to sort of target our research and outreach to answer them.
Thank you, Member Noonenkamp. Member Woodward.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. Question for you on, or what kind of opportunities have you seen, for example, in South Broadway, south of Hampton to Bellevue?
Well, I think as Brian mentioned, we're really just getting started on the analysis side of our project. We've mostly been talking to people thus far, so we haven't gotten to the point of sort of analyzing, you know, what's happening in the various subsectors of the business area. But I think you're certainly pointing out an area that, you know, is at least in my mind, from my experience, you know, driving along Broadway, that maybe is a little less well formulated or less well defined in terms of what that niche is for that part of the city.
Okay. And also, are you going to be surveying and looking at the commercial, industrial type businesses also, and
Yeah.
meeting with them?
We want to reach out to them to understand what, you know, why are they here? What's good about being here? What are some of their challenges? Because I think we want to focus on industrial that has a lot of jobs that has, good paying jobs and a fair number of them under one roof, where there's, a greater economic impact. So a lot of those business types can provide pretty good wages for people that for people that don't have a 4-year degree, and there's, they're an important part of the economy that's sometimes overlooked.
And I think that is, excuse me, a good point. It is kind of overlooked. I mean, I think it's been an important part of Englewood's economic base for a long time, but it was pointed out to us by someone that those kinds of businesses, don't generally participate in things like the chamber or the downtown development association kind of activities. They tend to be there and do their own thing. But I think it's, I think we want to make sure we understand, what's successful and what's still thriving versus, because as was pointed out earlier, some of those industrial areas are also being challenged by redevelopment pressures for residential development. So I think understanding, what the balance is that makes sense for the city there is important.
No, I understand that. And up on the hill in far northwest, there's a lot of industrial down here. I mean, this is kind of like a almost hidden custom car building and stuff. And years ago, I heard it was really second to LA.
Oh, wow.
Which you start going through some of those places and you start understanding that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we think it's a question that is worth asking in this process because so that there can be, some intentional thought about it. I think one clarification that's good to make here is that this is not a land use document, though. Right?
Yeah.
This is not a zoning ordinance. It's not a comprehensive plan. It's a little more organizational, right? Who does what? What are, where are we going? But it certainly does. It certainly touch, as you're, based on your questions, it certainly does touch on a lot of these land use issues, parking.
Okay.
Good
Thank
questions.
you.
Thanks.
Member Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. I wanted to just speak to some of the opportunities as you've asked here, and I think in terms of business growth, one of the things that I think in terms of just kind of a shift in thinking is coming out of the pandemic and having kind of a survival mentality. I think it's time to move into a thriving kind of mentality. Like, what can we do to help our businesses get to the next level? And I think there's some real barriers for businesses going from like a small business to a medium-sized business to a large business. What does it take to expand manufacturing or to grow into a regional kind of approach or even multi-state approach to a particular businesses? How can we identify those businesses that are kind of at the cusp and need help along the way? And what resources could the city provide to really bring the training or the tools that they might need to take that next step? Because I think that's where you really see, as you guys, one of you mentioned, that's where you see most business growth is the businesses actually growing. So putting our emphasis there, I'm not as interested in trying to attract or incentivize large businesses, because I think a lot of times the way that works out is cities start competing to get a big something here, and the cities lose when they're the ones competing for a business. You end up giving too good of a deal to them and don't see the economic benefits of having them in your city. They might as well be somewhere else if you've tax incentivized them so much that they aren't even bringing much in. I mean, jobs are good, but if we can grow our home base, take the businesses already there and grow those businesses, I think that's a kind of a stronger approach to building those things, the jobs and the economic impact over the longer term. And then regarding the parking issue, I'm happy to hear that you guys maybe don't see that as a big priority for this plan. I think the people best positioned to know what they need for parking are the businesses themselves. You know, what is it, how much parking does a business need to thrive? You know, those businesses are well positioned to determine that. And so requiring parking can actually suck the economic life out of a business, or creating a place where you have, you know, vast seas of parking, that those are places that can't actually hold businesses. So I'm more on the end of let's figure out what the minimum parking that we need to make a really walkable, economic, thriving city. You know, Rhino is great, but I want to be able to walk around in Inglewood. And if we're going to build a place, I think there are some lessons to take away from other places, that maximizing parking can really end up hurting a place. So I'd like to put that back on the businesses themselves and figure out, you know, let them decide what level of parking they need to really thrive as a business.
Great input. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Member Anderson. I'll ask a question and then I'll pass it to Mayor Pro Tem. So one question, then a couple of comments. So what are we using as a definition for small versus large business? Because the way that I look at a small business is maybe less than 20 employees. So you guys would be classified as a small business.
Yep.
Medium size may be anywhere between 20 and 200, 500, something along those lines. Anything over that would be considered large business. But what's your definition for that?
Great question. We haven't put a cutoff on that yet. I think I usually think of it as under 20 to 50 maybe, and then medium is 50 and larger. I think there's actually an official definition out there from the.
I don't think it's in our minds far off from the numbers you were throwing out there. I don't think there's any absolute, you know, right or wrong figure, but generally, small businesses being less than 20 or 25, to me, medium might be up to 100, and then large over that. But
Right. And I think it kind of goes to the point of Member Anderson, where we're talking about how do we incentivize businesses to get here. So incentivizing large businesses, and I'm thinking back to like the Amazon bidding war for that second headquarters, right? Obviously, we probably don't have the space for something like that, but incentivizing small business and maybe even those smaller, medium-sized businesses. I would like to understand what we could be doing as a city to bring those type of businesses here. One of the weaknesses that I see for the city is that we don't have as many small business or employers here within the city. So that's what I like to see. So I like to see more a vibrancy during the day, late afternoon, and then obviously the residents take over in the evenings to support the restaurants and businesses that are currently in place. The other comment that I wanted to make was, what is it that we would like to prioritize? And me personally, I always thought it was easier to keep the businesses that are here in place, try to keep them here, and then obviously then expand out in terms of new businesses. So that's the way that I just see the mentality. I think it's just keeping the businesses that are currently here to be the easiest aspect, and just making sure that we're doing everything possible. So I think those were my 3 points. So I'll pass it over to Mayor Pro Tem.
I heard one thing that was very interesting to me earlier, which is this concept of industrial versus residential balance. The district I represent, District 4, is basically on the cusp of what you're describing here, this pressure, this residential pressure pushing into our industrial area, and some pushback from both the residents and loss of industrial in that area. So I think that in particular would be a very useful item to begin working on immediately. Secondly, I wanted to go back to the weaknesses and challenges. I think it was, yeah, the last one, not enough large events. I'm not sure that this body is of one mind on that. Our city has a number of events that we conduct throughout the year, at least 3 of which that I can think of, which are large for Inglewood. One thing that would be useful to me before I was ready to engage on trying to increase the size of the events that we're holding, or the number of events that we're holding, is what other communities are doing and how that's worked for them. One of the things that makes Inglewood is this sense of community, and we've been trying to build that with smaller events in neighborhood areas, and that's the direction that I would like to go. We have the 3 larger events that I'm thinking of are the annual tree lighting and Christmas event at Bellevue Park. the 4th of July event, and our block party. Those are all heavy lifts for our staff as it is. So I'd be a little bit concerned about increasing the size or number of events, both from a benefit to the community standpoint and from an ability to execute standpoint.
Very good, thank you.
Member Russell.
Thank you. So I guess I have one more question. Since you're helping us develop an economic development strategy, some of these are discussions that you want to have like we're having here, but also after you've gone out to visit with the stakeholders, you'll come back with some recommendations also, correct? So I don't want to cut off parking to the extent that we would lose current businesses, because I do believe there's areas of town where businesses are struggling because there's not enough parking to support their business, and they may leave Inglewood, and that would be problematic. So I would like your recommendations to us for what is viable in different areas also. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Don't see any, so thank you very much, Mr. Duffany and Mr. Gimon. Did I pronounce that correctly? For your presentation tonight, we look forward to hearing the subsequent 2 meetings that we have on this. And Mr. Hollingsworth, if there's anything that you want to add before?
Thank you, council, for the feedback tonight. It was excellent, and really pleased that EPS is involved in this process, economic planning system and planning systems. I just have 3 things to underscore about what was said tonight that I think is going to be kind of key coming forward. I'm really enthusiastic about hearing more about the best practices of other jurisdictions that are similar to Inglewood. And I think that's going to be something key that we want to look at. What are they doing that we might be able to parlay off of? Interactions with our key economic partners. We've got 11 economic partners, which is unique, and have a dialogue about what we can offer and what they can offer us in our constituents and our business community. And finally, we really are going to get out into the community with our stakeholders, and that's key. And I'm really thrilled about that aspect, and we're going to hear a lot more about all of these issues from our stakeholders. And I look forward to bringing that feedback to council as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hollingsworth, and thank you again for your presentation this evening.
You're welcome, thank you. Great
Thank you.
questions.
So up next is the CodeNext update, and we have, there we go, Mr. Isham, if I remember correctly, the pronunciation, Isham. Came close. Mr. Isham and Mr. Bell here to provide an update on the Title 16 and the work of the UDC Steering Committee.
Mayor, could I interrupt for just a second?
Yes.
I don't know if anybody else is having this issue, but my speaker here is really loud and slightly delayed, and it's a little bit distracting. I don't know if we can have the volume turned down on these speakers, or because I find it's much easier to hear if I turn my mic on and the speaker goes off.
Sounds good. Yeah, Member Anderson, I know that they were turned up a little bit, but if we could just speak into the mics, I think we could turn down the volume on the mics.
I'll check into that right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Anderson.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Brian Isom, Planning Manager, and Brook Bell, Senior Planner with the Community Development Department. We're going to be here to kick off the discussion around our CodeNext update tonight. The conversation originally the conversation about the Unified Development Code began with the adoption of Inglewood Forward, the city's comprehensive plan. The plan places renewed emphasis on community priorities and emerging issues to support Inglewood's existing residential neighborhoods, incentivizing and maintaining more affordable and attainable housing, diversifying the types of housing available, promoting mixed use and transit-supported development along key corridors, and addressing walkability and sustainability within the community. Our consultant team of Chris Brewster with Gould Evans and Matt Ashby with Ayers and Associates are here to present the status of the project since our last update on February 7th. This update includes summaries from the town hall meeting held on February 17th, the community workshop that was held on April 14th, and the ongoing discussions being had within our UDC Steering Committee. And with that, we'll kick it off to Chris and Matt.
Thank you, Brian. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks for having us again tonight. As Brian just said, I'm going to just recap things since we last met with you on February 7th. The quarterly update on February 7th, we left off with the key priorities our steering committee had directed us to, and those were fairly consistent with the code review that was done in 2020 and 21 as a follow-up to your comprehensive plan, and that dealt with walkability and street design, walkability and parking, much like the discussion we just heard associated with economic development, housing options, neighborhood character, and then housing attainability. That last one we are going to be incorporating into a grant-funded project that is just now starting to get kicked off. So most of our engagement from last February dealt with those first issues. As Brian mentioned, we had a public kickoff meeting on February 17th. It was attended both in person and online. We introduced the findings of the steering committee, and then we presented some preliminary issues and discussions to them. Basically, the strategy was to start the discussion and then engage in a period of online exploration for those participants. And that was twofold. It was one, to let us dive a little deeper into some of the issues, but also to try to set the timing of a larger public event with when we suspected people would feel more comfortable meeting in person. And so that worked out fairly well. And we took advantage of that time to develop some of the online engagement materials. We did meet with the steering committee again on March 22nd. That meeting was primarily to give them a preview of some of the online materials and give a little further direction on what we would prepare for that March and April period prior to the public meeting. Matt Ashby is going to go a little bit more into some of the online materials and engagement, but just to quickly hit on those, we produced, for all of those key topics that were the subject of our last quarterly update meeting, we produced an introduction video that would give people a high-level explanation of why the issue is important and how the development code impacts it. From there, we prepared a bunch of interactive exercises where people could go look at some modeling or application of those standards to a relevant or prototypical blocks and sites in the community and gain an understanding for how those issues impacted development. And then lastly, we prompted them with a series of questions or thoughts, like, so how should the code address this? Again, not to get answers, but just to gauge people's appetite for looking at different things through the code update. And then the fourth element of the online engagement was having what we call deeper dives. So issue papers that broke down the issue a little more, led to examples or case studies in other communities, or even best practices on code language and approaches. So all of that was up online for several weeks before the meeting. And then we had our kickoff meeting on April 14th. And again, it was a hybrid format. We used online people who were participating and people were participating in person in the discussion, and it really worked rather well. We used the poll everywhere interactive site, so we could ask questions and get feedback in real time. And again, Matt will go into a little bit of that in more detail. The other thing I wanted to touch on, just to prompt discussion and questions from you all, that's in your council packet. We are in the process of deciphering some of the feedback we both got at the meeting, and then as well as for those that weren't at the meeting, all of the questions and the input was directed to an online survey that just closed as of yesterday, and planning staff has delivered us a synopsis of that. So there's another tool for getting feedback, and I think there was 106 participants in that post meeting online survey. So all told, we're getting a lot of pretty good input from a lot of different sources. But the council packet you have has some of our general impressions from the feedback, and I'll just touch on a few of those briefly. The first is accessory dwelling units, that idea of a single lot or single unit detached house could have another secondary unit on the same property. Everyone was fairly receptive to looking at reducing barriers to that in a wide variety of contexts. Right now, your code only allows it in the R1C zoning district. I think the public sentiment was, if the standards are right and if it fits in, it's a good way to add housing options and maintain the small scale and neighborhood community character that you have. So we're going to be looking into pushing a little further on that with the steering committee. There was also a willingness to seek more options for what we kind of call missing middle, but it's really broader than that. In your code, it's smaller lot detached houses on smaller lots. You have provisions in your code now, but they're very limited. And so people were interested in exploring options for allowing detached houses on smaller lots, and then moving up the scale to being more open in certain contexts to what we call small scale multi-unit buildings. So anywhere from 1 to 4 units in some districts, 4 to 12 units in other districts. But the key here was that still produces a very low scale of development, and it's a way to add what we consider maybe gentle density to neighborhoods. And so there was willingness to explore some of that. That leads into the largest concern of the public sentiment for infill and redevelopment, particularly on housing, was more of a larger concern for building scale. So the bulk, mass, and height of the building seemed to be a greater concern than how many units were in the building, assuming that we have all of the other impacts normalized through appropriate standards. So we will be looking at exploring that further. Flexibility was a really key component that came out of some of the discussions, if not mentioned specifically by some people, which it was. Cumulatively, the idea of flexibility resonated from all the variety of comments from people's different perspectives. And in our mind, that dealt with two things. Flexibility for different contexts in your community. So this plays right into that parking discussion. The idea that some areas may not need much parking because it's a transit oriented or highly walkable part of your community, and therefore they might need a different parking solution than other areas of your community. Your code already has that by having different strategies for the Broadway corridor, but there was at least a need expressed to explore that further. And not just for parking, I think it was for all site design elements that the context of the community will need to be having different strategies for different parts of your community. And I think the other aspect of flexibility, particularly as we talked about sustainability and some of the character and design standards, was to be open to different options. We won't be able to necessarily codify the exact right solution. So if we have criteria and processes so that we're open to options where if someone comes up with a better alternative, that we should be willing to accept that or at least explore that and have a process to facilitate that. That played into a lot of comments on the code framework being one of the most important things of this effort. And we couldn't agree more. Setting the code up to be a good decision-making tool oftentimes is more about the structure and processes and criteria and less about the specific standards. So we're going to be exploring that. And I think the reasoning many people expressed for that was there's certain things that are evolving right now. Like there's a lot of discussion around parking and electric vehicles and all of the sustainability things. Things are going to change in the next 10 years and probably fairly rapidly with some of those ideas. And so making sure the code has an appropriate structure to plug in new and emerging issues as well will be important. Lastly, a few things of concern. Property adjacencies seemed very crucial, particularly west and north facing edges. There was a lot of, and when we talk about sustainability, both sustainability and development impacts, mainly with lighting, access to solar, some of those concerns were brought up fairly strongly. There was a comment that I thought was actually pretty insightful that in a lot of our discussion, we seem to be planning against the car, and that's not necessarily true. I think what we're planning and trying to regulate against is having options for when we don't need as much around the car. And again, this centers a lot on your economic development discussion around parking as well. So we kind of summarize it as planning more for a car light so that people can choose other options when they have the opportunity to, but it's not necessarily about building communities absent cars. But I think building in flexibility, making sure we have the optimal amount and not necessarily regulating the minimum. So that idea of too much is as big a problem as too little, but still acknowledging that too little could be a problem. With that, another structure one was simplifying the code to the point where small scale and local developers can have better expectations and an easier ability and capacity to navigate what are actually quite difficult projects. The smaller infill projects are difficult. And so we were asked to kind of explore options that could set better expectations so that people know what they're getting into and there's a pretty clear path to to success based on the community's goals and standards and criteria. I'll kick it over to Matt now and maybe wrap up a little bit with some of our next steps of what we're doing with this information. So Matt, if you want to go into a little more depth on how the online engagement and the poll everywhere process worked from your perspective.
Yes, so we wanted to execute the April workshop in a way that provided exceptional participation opportunity from both online folks as well as folks who wanted to attend in person. And ultimately, we would like to provide kudos to city staff for their expertise in providing really seamless technology. We were able to provide the same level and quality of experience for both in-person participants as well as the online folks by using the Poll Everywhere software, which basically enabled us to pose questions that folks were able to keypad poll either in the room from their cell phones or from their individual online locations. We had about 40 different participants, both online, combined between the online and in-person public meeting. We also wanted to extend that opportunity to a longer term, several weeks opportunity to engage. And we had over 200 online participants with the survey mechanism that closed yesterday. We're still in the process of analyzing those results and comparing them with the results from the April 14th workshop. But generally, they seem to be pretty well in line with one another. And the feedback that we were seeking during that discussion was not necessarily decision points, but more of general direction to help us to explore different options, some of the things that Chris mentioned earlier. And we are still continuing to provide the Inglewood Engage site with information that people can learn more about this process and explore issues in greater depth, including videos as well as 3D models and extra explanation on specific topics. So as we move into the coming months, we'll be focusing on smaller groups and technical discussions and really targeted engagement with respect to teasing out some solutions to some of the issues that we have had raised to date. And additionally, next steps, we'll be working with the housing study to coordinate on specific outreach in an effort to make sure that we're not creating burnout among the public for public meetings. So I really want to make sure that we're providing quality opportunities for people to meet them where they're at. With that, Chris, I would turn it back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And just to recap some of the next steps. So we are scheduled to meet with our steering committee next week on the 17th. We will plan to tabulate some of the survey results that Matt mentioned a little further and have a more comprehensive picture of the public input. And that's going to allow us to prompt them with, it'll be the first time meeting with the committee since the public engagement meeting. So we'll prompt them with some more specific questions or strategies of how we think some of those sentiments impact the code, as well as if there's any issues that maybe need some broader outreach because of either public sentiment or a direction the code is going. So that idea of engaging smaller focus groups on topic-specific discussions over the summer months will be part of that meeting. And then in addition to meeting with our steering committee based on the direction and outcome of that meeting, as well as this discussion tonight, we're going to start meeting with the technical committee, which is staff level people whose departments and day-to-day work is impacted by the code. And so we'll begin starting to piece together drafting strategies and draft languages. So all of those things should occur or at least be well on their way prior to the next quarterly update meeting we'll have with you in August. And with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions, or Brian, if there's any, or Brooke, if there's anything you feel we've missed, feel free to jump in.
Mr. Brewster, Mr. Ashby, thank you very much are you guys able to hear me? because I'm not hearing it now. Thank you very much for that. I guess I should have stated at the beginning that although there were no slides, a lot of the information that you covered were under the analysis portion of the item within today's update, so within the first page. But with that, I'll go ahead and just pass it to council for any questions. Member Noonekamp.
Thank you so much for the presentation, and for those online for joining us as well. Exciting to see this project continuing to move forward. I just had 2 comments based on tonight's update. One is one of the notes that you guys took from the interaction with the community about setting expectations and simplifying standards and procedures for small scale and local developers. I just really want to underscore this. I think it's so important for our stakeholders in the community to be able to anticipate and know kind of what the rules of the game are, and that the rules don't change midway through. And with what we're seeing right now on costs and long-term planning that's needed to build in our community or to redevelop areas that are in desperate need of it, the more we can do to help them expect what those things will be, I think is going to be really, really important in setting those expectations and having this plan be really clear for those partners. So I'm really excited to see that here. And then I wanted to just make a point about some of this citizen engagement. Do you have a sense of, I see, the first, we had 26 participants and then we had 44 participants. Do we have a sense, are we trying to hit like a baseline or a sense of how much citizen engagement we think is appropriate for a project of this size? Does that question make sense?
Yes, and I can start, and Brad, Brooke, or Brian chime in because you know your community best. From the consultant standpoint, I think engagement on a development code process is always a little bit unique because we're talking to people about things they don't regularly deal with, and they may not it's easy to get into the weeds rather quickly. Unlike a comprehensive plan, when we're clearly talking about policy, direction, experiences in your community, things you want to see. So when we take it to the next level on code, it does get a little bit tricky, which is why our engagement has tried to remain at a high level and discuss broad principles. With that said, we don't necessarily have a benchmark to say, yes, we know we've hit the communities. We've heard from everyone. What we're really trying to do is listen for things because the code is implementing the plan. Your plan is already adopted. The code is going to implement that. How we implement it might be a little bit different or nuanced, but we're listening for things that tell us that, hey, maybe everyone didn't agree 100% on the plan, or maybe there's several different ways to implement things in the plan differently. And from our assessment, we haven't heard any of that. Everything we're hearing is really consistent with A, the plan, and B, the code audit that was done that had also had very extensive public engagement. So we're getting the same types of feedback and results, and so that's giving us a comfort level that there aren't too many uncovered issues.
That's great to hear. The only maybe suggestion I would make is when we solicited feedback from the community on the walk and wheel plan, we tacked it onto community and city events where staff was able to be there, citizens were able to kind of show their engagement or their preferences for different things in the plan as they were participating in a city event that they would already be at. And so as we're talking about kind of fatigue and some of those things, I wonder if tacking on to some of the city events we have coming up might be a strategic idea. So I'll leave that for staff to think about.
Thank you, Member Noonekamp. Member Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I didn't have any questions, but did want to weigh in on the community engagement as well, because I did attend one of the events here in the community room, and I was really impressed with the quality of the interaction, how the consultant was able to lead the citizens were there into a good conversation that wasn't at too high of level, but was really gathering really helpful feedback. And I don't know if maybe the numbers were in there, but it was really well attended, both in person and online. And it was just a joy to to hear that conversation and to hear what all the citizens were thinking. And I thought it was, for this subject, a fairly high level of engagement from the citizens as a whole. So I'm really encouraged at the process of citizen engagement, and I think it's going to continue to go well moving forward. So thanks to staff and to Mr. Brewster and Ashby as well for how they they conducted that event. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for that, Member Anderson. Member Russell.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, and I just want to make sure that we continue making sure that the people that will come to the meetings rather than participate online are still continued to reach out to them. I guess I do have a question because my take on this, and it just may be the way that it's written, on the one that says density or number of units per building seems to not be as large of a concern as building scale, meaning bulk mass and height. I actually think that they're both of concerns to a lot of people. So I don't really understand what you all meant by this. When you're out visiting in the community, people are not happy about the increase in density, especially as it impacts the parking in their neighborhoods. So if somebody could explain what that means to me, maybe I'm understanding it wrong. That would be
No, I think you have the same assessment as us. What I meant, part of what I said was as long as all of the site improvements and impacts are met, and parking being one of them. What it's really indicating is when we presented information on smaller scale multi-unit buildings, people had a more willing acceptance to consider fitting that into their community rather than if we presented something that said this is 15 units per acre without seeing it in a building type, then there's an opposition to it. So I think that although density is not unimportant, I think this, by our assessment, how the project actually fits into the site and context is of higher concern and higher importance.
And so we'll see that more clearly at the next update?
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Russell. Mayor Pro Tem.
I'm curious if there was anything in the outcome of this community engagement round that was a surprise that might have caused a change in direction for you, as opposed to just being information that you already knew.
That's a great question. We haven't gone through all of the online things yet, so I'm sure there will be things in the comments there that have been left over the last couple weeks that will be that. I think my impression from the public engagement, not so much a surprise, but things that are causing us to think of like, hey, is there a way to address that? And it was the comment on, you know, when we're talking about sustainability or when we're talking about impacts of higher scale buildings, it's really the north and west sides that are more important than those. And so and this kind of plays with my wrestling with trying to keep the regulations simple, but at least it has us thinking about, is there something to be looked at there? So that's the one that jumps to my mind most immediately. I don't know if staff or Matt, if you have any others.
I guess one of the things that surprised me a little bit was how walkability was so important to so many people, and how they saw how that related to parking. And if you look at an area like Inglewood Parkway between Broadway and this place, I think a lot of people talked about how that wasn't very walkable. Now that there's a lot of factors that play into that, you know, our roundabout, as well as the distance of buildings to sidewalks and the relationship between parking and sidewalks and landscaping. But I didn't know we had so many walkers and potential bikers. So that didn't surprise me, but it was certainly voiced.
Mayor Pro Tem, go ahead.
On a somewhat related topic, I kind of hear the desire to have some flexibility in the code, and I'm wondering how that fits. Right now, we have things in our city that go through the PUD process because they maybe don't quite fit whatever the underlying zoning is, and we've decided to make an exception. I guess conceptually, the issue I'm having is sort of understanding how we write a code that says these are the rules, but then we add flexibility for other things. Can you explain that a little bit better for me, or in a little more depth?
Yes, that's an excellent question, and it's probably best explained with just a concept right now, but it'll become more clear as we begin to draft it. But we look at adding flexibility in really three different ways. Codes are kind of famous for either resorting to flexibility through the variance process or through a more vague planned process that you mentioned, and your code has some of the symptoms of that idea of, well, we're open to alternatives and options, just show us a plan. That's one that has really low expectations on the outcome. So we want to improve on that. So we'll look for three ways. Setting a range in standards is often an easy way. In other words, like parking is a good example. We may not know that 4 parking spaces per 1,000 is the right number, but we know that right number might be anywhere between 2 spaces and 6 spaces per 1,000. So having a range is a first level of flexibility. The second would be to consider options that are different from what the standard says. And the only way to do that without the variance or planned aspect that you mentioned that we're trying to avoid would be to have very clear objectives up front of what we're trying to achieve by that standard, and then have a process on the back end with criteria that say, if you're meeting that standard in another way, you need to hit these criteria and it needs to meet our design objective, and then we would be open to considering it. And sometimes that can have a more abbreviated process for review than that planned application. And then the last one, when we do resort to those more larger scale open planned processes, we want to be very clear on what benefits you're getting from flexibility. So it can't just be flexibility for that particular project. You're usually considering flexibility for bigger and broader community-wide benefits. And so we want to be very clear on what targets we're hitting when you do have that more open flexibility. So those are 3 main strategies that we will try to incorporate into the new code.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Seeing none, Mr. Bell, Mr. Isom, thank you very much for your presentation tonight. Mr. Brewster as well, and Mr. Ashby, I believe it was. Yeah, we're looking forward to continuing this dialogue as we move forward. Didn't ask a question tonight, but I keep looking at that calendar. It's like, are we really going to get this done within the next 6 months? So it's a tight time frame, but really looking forward to having this conversation moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
And up next, we have the mission, vision, and values discussion. So I believe the Assistant City Manager Tim Dodd, South Platte Renew Deputy Director of Engineering Jamie Sofulco, and members of the mission, vision, and values staff team will be present to discuss the process. I see that everybody's getting ready. I know that this is something that in my full-time work, that this is something that's very important to my company. So I'm really looking forward to hearing the direction from city staff and the committee. I know that this has been a lot of work to getting to this point. And I know, I guess for members of council, I know that this is information and direction. I guess we will be giving some direction in terms of what may be missing, but I know that this is mostly informational on the work that's been done, and just making sure that our staff is receiving the tools necessary in order to ensure that they are developing the right culture to meet the needs of not only the rest of their rest of staff, but also meeting the needs of the public. So I'll pass it to you, Assistant City Manager Dodd, to get us started.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, members of council. So first, we're just going to introduce ourselves. So Tim Dodd, Assistant City Manager.
Jamie Sofulco, I'm the Deputy Director of Engineering at South Platte Renew. Kimberly Ramuno, I work in the Utilities Department.
Jerry Brown, Senior Permit Technician with the Building Department.
Sarah Stant, Recreation Supervisor at the Inglewood Recreation Center.
Trey Blake, Public Works.
Great, thank you. And I just want to thank Jamie for lending her expertise as she's done this for South Platte Renew and also in other places in Colorado. And just want to thank everyone up here tonight. This really was what you're seeing tonight and what you read in your packets is representative of over a year's worth of work. And so we're just really proud to be here tonight and thank you for the time. So we're each going to kind of tag team this. I'm just going to start by quickly going over the agenda and then also the origins of how we got started. Then we'll go over the engagement process that Jamie's going to go through in detail. Then we'll all play a role in going through what we're proposing as a mission, vision, and then the value statements. And then at the end, we'll talk about next steps and obviously have time for questions and feedback. So the origin of the project, so you may see if you meet, and I think many of you or all of you have been in the Pikes Peak meeting room or different rooms in the city, you've seen our existing mission, vision, and value statements. That's what you see on the screen. These were developed, I think, about 4.5 years ago through an internal process. In the fall of 2020, City Manager Lewis and I started doing focus groups, and the purpose was to develop something called the Blueprint for Organizational Success. This really was the city's internal strategic plan, and in March of 2021, you voted to add it to the city's strategic plan as the governance section. And one of the things that came up during those focus groups was the need for a clear mission, vision, understanding how what someone does as a deputy city clerk ties into the mission statement, what someone does as a plant operator at South Platte Renew ties into the mission of the city, notwithstanding the fact that, of course, different departments and different teams have their own missions, but really wanting to make sure that we identified the mission, vision, and values of the city of Inglewood. And so Director Van Rye noted that Deputy Director Sefulco had experience in doing this, and the three of us had a meeting, and that's what really started kind of this project. And as I mentioned, we've been talking about it. I think we first met in December of 2020, I think. So it's been quite some time that we've been working on this. And I'll turn it over to Deputy Director Sefulco to go through the engagement process.
All right, well, thank you for having us. I've been at the city for 3 years, and this is my first council meeting, so I'm excited. So I've been through this process about 4 times, which is weird going to engineering school. I would not think I'd be writing vision, mission, and values, but I think it's a testament that this process that we went through really does work, because you really get buy-in from the bottom up, and it is a long iterative process that really does work. So again, our champions team, they were voluntold or volunteered from our directors. So again, we felt like this group really was the leaders within the city. So we wanted to make sure that we had a range of people that had been at the city for a long period of time to a short period of time, also at identifying all different types of departments. So real quick, just kind of to formalize what we mean by vision, mission, and values. The values really are our foundation. It's who we are, it's our foundation, it's how we shape our culture and how we act every single day. From there, our mission is our purpose and action. It's really how and what we do every day to make sure that we get to our vision. And then finally, our vision. It's this big aspirational goal, something we'll never actually really achieve, but we're always trying to get there, and it's our overarching purpose in everything that we do, and really our true north. So this process, it's really important that we have management support. So with Sean and Tim, we had leadership support with this, and really it is a bottom-up approach. So it isn't just management saying, hey, this is what we're gonna do. It's coming from the employees and really getting buy-in from the employees. And so what we did was we developed these focus groups, and we'll kind of go into some of the details of that later in the presentation, but really trying to define the culture. And culture really is how and what people perceive at City of Inglewood. So we really wanted to see what people thought and then develop that into the vision, mission, and values. Real quick, so from there, we take all those focus groups, define it down, and then give our values. We then go and get our vision, which is really, again, that goal, and then really the how is the mission. And so that's kind of the weird process in the pyramid from the bottom-up approach. So we had a total of 8 focus groups, which was quite a testament because this was all during COVID times. And so we had some in person, some virtual, but we actually had over 100 people, which it was our goal to get 100 people to participate. Either this was in person or virtual. We had an anonymous survey too, if that people felt more comfortable with that. And we had so much data from this. I think someone counted 470 unique comments. So we really got people talking and speaking. And we created this safe space where people's managers or supervisors were in the room, so we really could get the truth and what they thought of the culture at City of Inglewood. We counted, and we had 15 champions teams meetings. So if you do the math with all of us, that's a lot of hours of work. This is something that we just didn't do overnight. We really put a lot of thought and effort to make sure that this was something that could really stand the test of time. So for our focus groups, we did this, what was called defining of the current culture. And what we did was we brought the focus group in and we had this big thing printed out. And we talked about what do we currently have in the culture that we want to keep? What's working right now for City of Inglewood? And we kind of would write those little factoids in the circle. We then talked to the in. So what do we currently have at City of Inglewood, but what's going to take us to that next level? What's going to make us this high-performing team in a city and a place that people want to work? And then finally, the out. There's definitely toxic parts of culture, and we wanted to make sure that we identified that and got rid of it and got that stuff out of our culture. So this is the process that we went through. So this is just an example of one of the brainstorming sessions. So this is like one of about 10 of these sheets. So you can see the amount of information that was done through these focus groups and really trying to define everything. And people, when you got them talking, really got talking. So this was a great amount of information. From there, the team worked really hard to try to group the certain themes. And it was hard. I think we ended up with like 12 themes that we ended up having to kind of distill down because obviously we can't have 12 values and a lot of things were overlapped. And so we had this is probably majority of our meetings of really trying to define and loop. And what do we mean by leadership? Maybe we want to talk about innovation. Or does that really mean sustainability? What is the impactful word or the value? Or what's the important content that we want through this?
Okay, so as you can see in the last slide and what Jamie said, there was a lot of information that we narrowed down. And so through our brainstorming sessions, the next slide will show our identified values based on those themes. So value people, resilient leadership, cultivate partnerships, one team, pride in Inglewood, and foundation of trust.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor, Council. Chad Reed with the Police Department. Sorry I could not be there in person tonight. But our first value is valuing people. We empower our employees to achieve greatness by creating a place where everybody wants to work. This is extremely important in the Police Department and something that we are spreading far and wide throughout the city work group.
Resilient leadership, demonstrating adaptability through strategic thinking and proactive planning. People want leadership that can successfully navigate through challenging times and guide and lead others with courage and conviction.
Cultivate partnerships, investing in our community through collaboration and extraordinary service. Through our outreach programs such as our special events, boards and commissions, remarkable efforts of employees and our community members alike, it has become evident that our cultivated partnerships within the community will continue to advance this community forward.
One team, embracing diverse perspectives and ideas because every person counts. Everyone has a purpose no matter where you work in the city. We want to support different ideas and different strategies.
Pride in Inglewood, honoring our history and celebrating Inglewood's uniqueness. Our consensus for this value for community is our community mindset. It reflects our proud, diverse people and businesses and our attitude for fostering our community while envisioning its future.
And rounding out our core values, we have a foundation of trust. So in other words, acting with integrity in everything we do. Trust and integrity were two common themes we heard among focus group participants and something we felt was instrumental to include as a core value. It reflects not only our actions within the organization and how we behave as employees, but extends to our actions within the community as well. It was important to the focus group participants to know that their purpose helps to establish and, more importantly, reinforce trust within the community. So moving on to our mission, we have the City of Inglewood is dedicated to enhancing the quality of life for those we serve by providing superior services to maintain a vibrant and inclusive community, investing in our future through fiscally responsible decisions, and preserving our unique identity while welcoming new growth. We felt it was important to communicate our mission as action statements. So we have providing, investing, and preserving. We want our employees and our community to know our mission is ongoing. It's our everyday commitment to make the city of Inglewood a place that people want to be a part of.
All right, so our vision that we've developed is advancing our community together. And here it is, our entire project all into one slide. And we would now like to open it up to you all for feedback or questions that you may have.
I just really quickly wanted to go over the next step. So it's all right though. So tonight, obviously, we're discussing this with council and getting your feedback and hopefully support or ideas. The next step with that support would be branding and communications, developing new posters and communication materials, and then finally working to embed this in the culture of the organization. So some work groups and departments are ready when they meet monthly or whatever it is. They have check-ins related to values. Our employee advisory committee does awards every year that relate to the city's values. So we really don't want these to just be posters on the wall or things on our website. We actually want them to be lived mission, vision, and values. And so that will be a big lift that we'll move on to when support is received. And so with that, we'll take questions and feedback.
Thank you very much to the Champions team for this. Really appreciate it. I'll kick it off for council. Any questions? Anyone want to start? Or comments? Member Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, everyone, for the presentation. I'm really impressed with the process here of really going down and drawing out the an understanding of the current culture. And then the part that really struck me was the in-out graph for how to work towards culture change. And I think that's so important in any organization, is to identify those toxic elements of the culture and try to get those out. So I'm really impressed with the process you went through here, and the outcome looks really good too. So I'm supportive of this and really appreciate all the work and that went into it. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Mayor Pro Tem.
I'd like to echo Councilmember Anderson's comments. And one of the things that I really like about this project is that as a body, this council spends the vast majority of its time interacting with director level staff. And it's really nice to see some people from the trenches who interact with our residents on a daily basis and develop a culture and buy into that culture of service to our residents and to each other. I don't see anything on this that I could not obviously agree with, and I appreciate the work you've done. It looks like a lot of thought went into this, so thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Member Noonekamp.
Thank you for the presentation. It's so good to see you all. I concur with Mayor Pro Tem. It's so fun, I always think, to have staff here in the room with us, because in so many ways, you are the face of Inglewood for so many of our residents. You are the ones who get much more interaction than some of us do. And I'm so excited when we can collaborate. And we want to be on the team as well, on one team, and really appreciate you being here. It has been said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And this matters so, so much to our community. And I'm so proud of the ownership that each of you has taken, not only over the city, but over the place, this organization as a place that's great to work at. And that matters so much. It matters for the sense of belonging that all of our staff has here. And it also matters for new people who want to come and say Inglewood is a great place to work. And we need those fresh ideas. We need people to come in and continue to serve our vibrant and growing community. So I'm so grateful for all of the hard work that you've put into it. I think the process is excellent. And if this is the place that you all want to work, I have no qualms with that. I have no changes, and really thrilled to see this outcome and really thrilled to see all of you. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, Member Noonekamp. Member Russell.
Thank you. I appreciate all the hard work. I just want to ask some of the hard questions, though. The bottom line is, I think you have buy-in with each other. How are we going to make sure there's buy-in with the community? Because that is who we all serve. They are our boss also.
No, that's a great question. And I think as we went through this, just like everyone mentioned, we are pretty public facing. A lot of us do interact with the public quite a bit. So when we were going through the words and how we wanted to, we really were going through the perception of what would our community members think of this? Would they be buying into advancing our community together? That's not only as City of Inglewood employees, as council, but also with our community. So we want to make sure that it was inclusive of that. And so we really took a lot of time and effort to really try to go through that lens as well.
I appreciate that. And I guess another thing is only time will tell really on this and how long. I've been in Inglewood for a long time, probably longer than anybody else in this room. And I actually worked at the city when I was a very young woman. And then I had children and decided to stay home. So, but I think there's been a lot of turnover in employees probably in the last 4 or 5 years. And so when you were discussing, does this have some impact on retaining employees? Do you think this will help retaining long-term employees?
So speaking from experience, having gone through this through South Platte Renew, my old job at Parker Water, really having that connected purpose and values of where we're going and being connected to that purpose is really important. Also, as far as like employees and behaviors go, going back to those values and be like, you're not acting with a foundation of trust. You're not acting with integrity, which is the foundation that we all agreed to when you came to work here. So it kind of does help guide your team as well as the way people act, and so you can make sure. So I personally think, and I've seen it, that it does. It's great to connect with something and be part of something bigger, especially when it's easy to remember and it's impactful. And that was a really important part of this process. We didn't want this big, long paragraph. We wanted someone, no matter where you work, to be able to remember the vision right immediately. So again, I have seen it work with employee retention, and a part of it too with the value people was we want to make that part of our foundation, that we want to invest in our employees to make sure that they feel successful and want to stay at City of Inglewood and see that bright future long term. Because yeah, you're right, retaining talent is a really tough thing right now.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then will the information also be used like in evaluations, in employee evaluations?
I think that was the ultimate goal.
Yes, the current values are part of what we call the EDTU, which is the Employee Development Tool. And so I think the expectation is that these values would be as well. And I just wanted to point out to Deputy Director Civilco's answer is that this project came from current employees. So there were many, I forget the exact number, but 10 or 15 that mentioned, I want to see what the mission is. I really want to see myself. I want to see how, as a police officer, I fit in with what the water plant does and vice versa. So certainly it was bottom up, ground up from how we did this, but just the concept of doing it came from those focus groups, came from employees. So.
All right, thank you very much, and I appreciate all you're doing for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Russell. I'll ask a question before I pass it over to Member Anderson, but actually, Member Russell asked one of the questions whether it was going to be used in an evaluation, and just for my curiosity, do we do quarterly check-ins or is it just a yearly?
We've currently hired someone, thanks to council's support for the funding, who is a business partner focused on train and performance management. And so one of the things that she is starting to work on is basically a redevelopment of that process. But currently as it stands, it's a once-a-year formal process. We do encourage things like coaching and counseling and check-in throughout the year. We want to make that more formal going forward.
Okay. And I did look at the slides, the defining the culture and identifying trends slide were the ones that really caught my eye. So a question for City Manager and also Assistant City Manager Dodd, but one of the areas that we've neglected in the past as a council is just funding additional training. And there's a lot of comments there about just growing as, as an employee, growing professionally in terms of just having the right skills and that type of thing. Is that something that we're going to be seeing as part of the budget for this year, or have there been any thoughts about providing better training opportunities and just workforce development, I guess, in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, thanks to your support, the council's support, we were able to bring a training professional on staff. I don't think it's the first time, I think it's the second time that we've had that position in HR. And so the city manager, HR director Weisky, and I basically worked with this individual to develop a work plan to basically build out a robust training program in the next year. We've already started chipping away at it. One of the small things that we just started last week is something called a lunch and learn program, where any employee can basically come for an hour, get lunch, and basically learn about a different topic. We really want to focus on developing a strong supervisory training program, such as a supervisory academy. We also want to create a training brochure, essentially, and have trainings that are offered on many different topics. Compliance training is something that happens throughout the organization. As you can imagine, some of our facilities, such as public works projects, parks, self-plat renew and utilities do require significant compliance training. So we want to bring that, tie that into HR and tie that into the work that we're doing to track training. In terms of needs that we may be coming before you for an enhancement, we may be requesting a small amount of funding for a system that would allow us to track training. Other than that, I'm unaware of any other additional budgetary needs. We really greatly appreciated the fact that you did support a training position in the budget last year. And so really this year is about building out that program.
Thank you. Member Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just had one follow-up question. Where would I go to learn more about the whole process that you went through? I have an organization that I need to do some of this kind of work with and would love to learn a little bit more because I think your process is really impressive.
Yeah, we don't have a formal like how to, but I'd be happy to share with you and provide materials that has worked. So
Would
I
love
can
it. Thank
reach
you.
out and get you that.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from council? Member Woodward.
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions with regard to, I mean, this is, I really like this a lot and the outcomes of it. During that, between departments and different things, were there any feelings or of competition, that sort of thing? And how did you, if there was, overcome that type of feeling?
No, I hear what you're saying, and I think that, at a point sometimes when you have these types of focus groups, especially without supervisors, managers, it can stray to a negative of, well, South Platte Renew isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing. So, and so I think what we really tried to do is, document that there's probably ability for improvement for efficiencies and working together and turned it into a positive. So if we want to be that next step in an organization, we have to be one team. We have to work together. We have to collaborate. And so again, taking that, but spinning it to like what we want to be instead of focusing on the negative, I guess.
I know I've been in courses through, I believe, CML that are very similar, where they fill the room with council people on this side, staff on this side, and then start exploring the differences. And it's really very interesting to see what's going on and some of the feelings coming out. And in the whole idea of it, and it was successful. By the end of that course, having that team feel and feeling like we are all working for the same common good, and we work best together. So this just really reminded me totally of that course many years ago for me.
And just to add upon that, now we have, 7, 8 champions who, again, will go back to our organizations that have such a different, wonderful perspective of this process and the buy-in. I know that I'm super proud of it, and so being able to share that in, that's through all these departments. And I think that's what's so great about this process is that we have people within the organization that can be the hype people for this and really have that connection.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other feedback from council? If not, I want to thank you each for everything you've done. So from the Police Department, Division Chief Chad Reed, Mr. Jose as well from the Police Department, Mr. Blake, Ms. Stamp, Mr. Brown, Ms. Ramuno, Ms. Deputy Director Sepulco, and Assistant City Manager Dodd on your work on this. Really appreciate it and thank you very much. You guys did great for your first time, so thank you. And with that, that now takes us to a break. We'll take a 10-minute break and get back here around 7:45-ish and continue the conversation. Thank you. All right, council, we're back on for agenda item 5, which is to discuss the garbage and recycling collection initiative and provide direction to staff. We are 6 again tonight, but with us running out of time, I'll just ask this council whether or not we should have this discussion again tonight, or if we should postpone until all 7 are here. But because we are short on time, I may be leaning on having at least a discussion tonight and just providing direction, but I'll open it up to members of council. Mayor Pro Tem.
We've punted this twice already. I'm ready to talk about it tonight.
Anyone disagree with that viewpoint?
I said we've punted this twice already. I'm ready to talk about it tonight.
All right, that sounds good to me. So there is no presentation tonight. Obviously, we've been talking about this for a couple years now. The way I see it, there's maybe 4 different ways, and there may be a 5th. One would be just to take the recommendations by the committee and move forward with that. I'll add a little nugget about that aspect of it. 2 is just accept one of the RFPs that have been put forth. 3 is just to squash it, and 4th may be just a something that I haven't outlined there. But does anybody want to start with discussion? Does anybody want me to start with the discussion? I'm in favor of either. So Mayor Pro Tem.
All right, I'll go first. As most people have been watching this process know, and as I believe every member of this body knows, I served for about 18 months on the committee that examined single hauler. One of our first orders of business when that committee was formed was to recommend the rejection of the first RFPs that came through. We then spent roughly 12 to 14 or so months crafting new requests for proposals, which we have now received responses to. As the committee indicated, the responses that we received did not meet the expectations or the requirements of the city. So the bottom line for me is, given strong resistance to the idea of single hauler trash, particularly in District 4, which is the district that I represent, as well as the fact that the proposals did not meet the deliverables that the city demanded, I am in favor of simply ending the project at this point.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Anyone else? Member Woodward.
Thank you. You know, I feel a little differently than you do, and I haven't been involved in it for the last 3+ years. I feel like the concept is good, single hauler is, you know, for the greater good of our community. I don't like the proposals. The recommendations that came from the committee on a number of the things to be renegotiating, I would like to see those things renegotiated. There's just a number of things I'd like to see in that, and I'm going to go through them. Needs to be about the cost. The cost is too high, is what we're hearing and what some of us have experienced with that, especially for seniors, low income, and disabled. There's got to be some sort of differential there. Size of the bins, I understand going from a 96-gallon bin down to something smaller that is more manageable would certainly be a lot easier. And I think as we get older, like I am getting older, it's getting harder to move that 96-gallon bin around. With regard to alley and streets, I think we need to be saying that it will be alley or streets at citizens' choice, period. I think we've got to address what happens with snowbirds and people going on extended vacations or vacations. I would like to go one more time at them and say, this is last and final RFP. And this is what we are expecting with some framework. See if there's a response and if they can come back with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Woodward. And before I get to Member Anderson, I did want to bring up one item as I discussed this issue with the city attorney earlier today about what the different options were in terms of how we can move forward after tonight. One item that the city attorney did bring to my attention was just the fact that our charter does not allow for a renegotiation. It's either you accept one of the bids or you reject the bids, but there is no renegotiation. So, well, basically the city attorney stated, and you can jump in here, city attorney, if you like, but that she strongly discourages us from trying to renegotiate. So that's one option. So the option that we would have here tonight was if we were to look to renegotiate in a sense, we would have to open it up to the 4 or 5 or however many waste companies are available to put in the bidding. We wouldn't be able to limit just to the 2. So that's an option for tonight, but it wouldn't be a true renegotiation.
Okay, if we, correct me if I'm wrong, if we said we are rejecting both of these bids and we are putting it out again, and if, I think there was only initially one other bidder, wasn't there? Waste Connections?
There may be 4 total, but yeah, you're right. I think Waste Connections was one of the early.
So there's 3, or I don't know if we were able to post something like that, but be very, very specific in this RFP, in that here is what is required, and this is where we're going from there.
Thank you, Member Woodward. City Attorney, did you want to jump in with anything there, or?
I will just add a little bit to what you said. We were able to fully analyze the issue, analyze charter, applicable law, look at some other legal challenges to different public bidding. And so it would be our recommendation that rather than go back and request someone sweeten the deal, that we just reject them all and invite everyone to bid again based on the new criteria that the committee has established or recommended.
Thank you, City Attorney. Member Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I too am not satisfied with the 2 bids that we got. I guess this would maybe fall into your 4th option slot, in that I'm not particularly satisfied with all of the committee's recommendations, and the primary one that I think is potentially the deal killer, and this is one I know has been a high priority to the committee, but I just I don't see how this actually meets the city's goals, and that's allowing alley or curbside service at every household or any household to choose. That means running 2 sets of trucks through the whole city. And I don't think we're going to get the price down to the place where we need it with that provision in place. And so I think if we were going to if we wanted to be serious about getting a bid that's going to get under $25, I think we'd have to have a conversation about that particular provision personally. Otherwise, I would rather not move forward than put something out there that I think is very highly likely to get rejected by these bidders, especially with gas prices having gone up so much since they bid last time. We're going to come back and ask them to bid on the same thing again, only come down on their price. I don't see it happening, and I don't think it actually accomplishes the goals, which are to reduce, have a serious impact on reduction of traffic, trash truck traffic in the city. And if we're running 2 sets of trucks through the whole city, it doesn't really accomplish the goal. So that's where I'm at. I'd like to have a conversation about all those provisions and see if there will be a way to get there with modifying the provisions from the committee.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Mayor Pro Tem?
Member Woodward, can I ask for some clarification on some of the statements that you made? Did you say that you would mandate alley and street side service?
Correct.
And my understanding is that was the single largest cost driver. It was one of the things that I wanted to have included in early discussions when I was participating both on the committee and in earlier discussions. Because of, first of all, people who engage haulers in the city of Inglewood right now have that choice based on the contract that they have with the haulers. So we're talking about taking away something from our residents, which based upon the unique geography of Inglewood, may actually make it vastly more difficult for them to do a task that we require them to do on a weekly basis. If your house is on a hill and you have an alley where you currently put your trash, and then we tell you that we're not accepting alley trash on your block anymore, then you have to roll that cart all the way down to the bottom of the street on a weekly basis when you never would have had to do that but for the mandate. I'm not okay with that. Secondly, on the subject of choice, again, you'll have to forgive me. I've briefly lost my train of thought here, so I'll just leave it at that. The street side versus alley, removing a choice that residents would otherwise have the option of negotiating for.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So I'll weigh in. When we started this discussion several years ago, obviously, this is something that I felt was something that would be beneficial to the city of Inglewood. You know, reducing trucks off the road, I saw as a big benefit. But I also thought that if we went to a single hauler, it would improve the service. Right now, I have one of those trash haulers that, depending on the Wednesday, they may or may not pick up. And it's been like that for several years. And even if I switched, there was only one good one that I've experienced, and that was Lee's before they got bought out by Waste Connections. They were the only ones that were consistent. So improving the service level, I thought was going to be a big benefit to moving to single hauler. And obviously, price should be a big benefit. The economies of scale for having the entire city under a single trash hauler should lower the bill for many residents. I'm not seeing that. I have not seen that in the proposals, and whether it's because of the services that we're asking for, obviously that's one component of it. Obviously inflation and what we've been going through over the past, since COVID, that really is playing another driver. I've been looking at it from ways that Member Anderson is thinking of. Like, you know, is alley service, obviously it is needed for many citizens within the city. But in order to actually get it down to the cost that we needed to get it down to, it may be one of the things that we have to look at whether or not it's something that we need to remove from the level of service. Saying all that, I do believe that I want to go back and look for one last price from the trash hauler, the waste management services, to see if we could get it back down to a level that is closer to $20 per month and not at the $27, $29, $31 that we're currently seeing. So I do see the benefit of a single hauler. Obviously, all the comments that we received from all the citizens, I'm taking into account. But when you look at all the comments, a lot of people were in favor of looking at this if the cost made sense. Right now, it doesn't make sense. So I would be in favor of rejecting the proposals as we see today and go back and see if we can get one last RFP out and see if that would meet the needs of what we're looking for our citizens. Member Noonan-Camp.
Thank you, Mayor. I concur with a lot of your thinking on this. You know, when I was first approached about this issue is when I was running for this office, and I was open then and remained open to the concept of single hauler because I want Inglewood to be a well-run, efficient city where our citizens receive quality, affordable services, and all of the aspects you mentioned about quality of service and economies of scale seem like it was worth at least considering. And if we can get a better service for our citizens, then I want to have that conversation. But throughout this process, we have heard so much about the unique needs of the citizens and how the different things that they need in their trash service. And we've learned that trash is incredibly nuanced. And in every citizen that has sent me an email or given public comment or testified in the public hearing or served on the commission, they really helped me clarify my thinking on this. And we need that citizen input to know what they care about and what they need. And at this point, I think it is abundantly clear that the RFP responses that we've received do not meet the needs or the desires of our citizens. It's too expensive and it doesn't deliver the level of service that they're looking for. I am open to going back and seeing if we can get something closer to what our citizens have asked for. I understand where Member Anderson's coming from about, what's the likelihood of getting that at the cost that we're looking for. From what I'm hearing from citizens, I think alley and curbside is a necessity. I don't think that it's appropriate for us to pick one over the other. I understand the concept, but I just think it's such an important issue for our citizens that I don't feel like I could support that at this time. There's a lot of ideas that sound really good in a vacuum. And then there's the question of, is it a good idea for Inglewood? And for our very specific city with our specific citizens and our specific needs. And if it's not good for Inglewood, I don't think we should move forward with it. And so that's kind of the question that we're at. And so I'm open to the conversation continuing, but I really don't think that with what we have in front of us that we can move forward.
Member Nunekamp, can you clarify that last statement? So would you be open to putting out an RFP again? And I'll let you answer that, but I need to clarify my statement as well, but go ahead.
No, sure. I'm open to going back with another RFP with the recommendations from the Citizens Committee. Those recommendations were elevated to us unanimously, and that Citizens Committee has a diversity of opinions, and I think that it's a good representation of the comments that we also heard during public comment and in a lot of the citizen engagement. So it needs to be under $25. I think there's some other ways that they're addressing price within their recommendations to try to get it down, but if that's not going to be an option, then I can't see a path forward for our city.
Right. Thank you, Member Nunekamp. And I agree with you. That was the statement I was trying to make. I would guess I was just adding color commentary on whether or not we would actually see that as part of the RFP or the responses to the RFP if we wanted to get down to a lower price level. So, Member Russell.
Thank you. I guess where I'm at, neither response addressed all the conditions of the RFP. Therefore, I would like to totally drop this. This has been going on for 3 years. A lot of the problems that we're having with pickup is because the city's been trying to negotiate with people for a couple of years, and I think that inhibits trash companies from wanting to work with people. I think that there's a lot of inherent problems there. I think a lot of the complaints that people have are a result of lack of code enforcement in the city. We have codes that say if you have an alley, you will have alley pickup. The reason that we allowed street pickup, and this was the city not enforcing the codes and saying, no, we have alley pickup only. They should have told that to the trash companies, and if the trash company didn't want to do it, look for another city. And part of it is neglecting alleys. I believe that the alleys are starting to be cleaned up, and I think that will make it easier for trash trucks. I agree with the public that if we go to single hauler trash, they're going to have these huge, massive trucks, which will do more damage to the roads that we already currently have. And so I think that things are working well for individuals the way they are now. $20 is not acceptable to me. I pay $17. And then to be forced into be paying more, I'm not okay with that. When I saw the amount that Commerce City was paying, like $13 a month for pickup, I would have jumped at that. But we've been negotiating for 3 years, and we have come back with nothing but more than what most people are paying. I think we have wasted the citizens' time on this. I think we need to move on and let everybody get their own trash company and just make sure that we enforce the codes. The other issue with code enforcement is trash trucks, according to code, are only to be allowed in the city on Wednesdays and Mondays, which means those would be the only 2 days that we deal with it. If we go to single hauler trash, there's going to be trash trucks in this city every day of the week. So I would like to just drop it and move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Russell. Before I go to Mayor Pro Tem, I think he was next. City Attorney, I know that I brought this up as a question, but waste companies, if we have it as part of code in terms of just alley pickup, are we able to mandate trash companies to pick up within the alley?
Well, first I reviewed our city code regarding trash haulers, and I couldn't find a specific requirement regarding alley pickup in any section of code. There are provisions that require it to be within a certain number of feet from your neighbor's property, or within the right of way, but not to interfere with traffic. But I couldn't find any specific reference regarding alleyways, so I reached out to Public Works today. I'm sure they haven't even seen it yet, to see if perhaps that's a requirement that's contained within our trash hauler's license or something like that. That said, City Council does have the authority to mandate where trash pickup will occur. So it is something we could include in municipal code, that trash pickup is required to be in alleys, or required to be curbside, or both. Our code just currently doesn't speak to it.
Thank you, City Attorney. Member Woodward.
Thank you. First off, with regard to the alleyways, I think the technology has changed so much since that code was written. If it is there, if it in fact is there, that it will be in all alleys. That the trucks are different now, they're picking up things, the technology is different. I know for my block, and I think this is for both of those trash haulers, you have your choice whether you're going to have everything picked up in the alley or everything picked up or on the street, or there's some people, I have one neighbor that has it one picked up in the front and one picked up in the back. So I guess I don't believe that it has to be that hard. Additionally, we don't have, every place in town here doesn't have alleys. There's lots of places up on the hill that don't have alleys. There's places over in District 2 that don't have alleys. And I think there's probably in all districts, there's places that don't have alleys. So I see that as a problem, saying something like that.
Thank you, Member Woodward. Member Russell.
It's just assumed, I don't have an alley. I can't have alley pickup, but it's assumed that if you have an alley, you would have alley pickup. I mean, just the history of trash in the city. When I was a young girl, it was my job to burn trash. There were ash pits. They were all at the alley. And then when the ash pits, when you couldn't burn anymore, they went away, then they began to pick up trash in the alley. And so, I mean, I don't know how many houses there are that have ash pits left. A lot of them are gone. I think there might be some. But, so I guess it's just understood that alleys were created for utilities, and it keeps trash trucks off the street. They can pick up two sides. When a trash truck is going down the alley, they can pick up both sides at the same time. When they're going down the street, they have to go down one way and back up the other, so that's two trips down the street. It's just safer, I think, to have trash trucks in the alleys, but whatever. So, thank you.
Thank you, Member Russell. Mayor Pro Tem.
I'll just note that one of the reasons why alley versus street service is so sensitive to me personally is because I do have an alley. The location of my fence line on the alley makes it exceedingly difficult for me to place my trash in the alley, because it would actually be in the passable portion of the alley, which neighbors who have garages on the alley drive through on a regular basis. So I would actively be blocking traffic if I placed my trash container into the alley, because of the way the previous owner designed the fence line. So when I engaged my most recent trash hauler, I called them and I said, okay, let's do business. And they said, we only do alley pickup. And I said, okay, let's not do business. And they said, please hold. We can pick you up on the street. And so I get my service on the street because when I told my hauler it was a deal breaker not to have service on the street, they said, you get your service on the street. That's the choice that I'm talking about. And a lot of citizens, I suspect, are facing circumstances similar to mine, where the unique design of their property makes it difficult to effectively respond to a mandate for either alley or street side service, something I'm very sensitive to. The other thing that I would also like to point out, which I pointed out in my initial statements, but I want to emphasize, this is not round one of proposals we're dealing with. This is round two. Everyone who is available in the market to bid has already told us their opinion on our proposal. And they have said, we cannot do what you are asking us to do at the price you are asking us for. That's why I'm in favor of just putting it to bed tonight, because they've already told us not once but twice, and yet we're looking for the third strike now. I just don't see the benefit of applying additional effort into the program when the most likely outcome is that we will get the same result now, and we will still have people in our community who are upset about the very fact that we are talking about this.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Member Anderson.
I'm pretty close to where Member Ward is, except I would be willing to talk about going back for another RFP if we could talk about, some of the cost drivers, but it doesn't sound like there's an appetite on this council for requiring alley only or street only or something like that in order to see if we can get the cost down. I think the odds that we would get something in the price we wanted with those, with the conditions from the committee are sufficiently low that I don't want to go through the process without that conversation. So I'm willing to say no to it tonight without support for that conversation on the cost drivers.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Member Newnham.
Member Anderson, I think from everything we've heard from the community, the alley versus curb is just such an important issue. And, I'm thinking about my elderly neighbors who don't have fence or a gate into the alley, and they would have to have construction and people, the onerous mandate for our citizens to have to redo fences and gates and all of these things to comply just feels really, really challenging and an ask that I think is probably too far for me to feel comfortable with. But I'm curious, are there any, and I'm fully aware that this is the main cost driver, right? But are there any other cost drivers that you think are worth discussing that make going back a conversation, for lack of a better phrase, that makes, the juice worth the squeeze?
Yeah, Mayor, can I answer that?
Yeah, go ahead,
Thank
Member
you.
Anderson.
The only other one that occurred to me was the large item pickup, but it doesn't look like that's actually in the citizen committee's follow-up. So I don't see anything in there otherwise that is a major cost driver. And so if we didn't require, I think those are the two big ones: the requiring large items and the requiring both sides pickup. So.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Member Newnham, you want to add to it?
Yeah, I was just going to agree. I think that was when they presented to us, they mentioned removing large item to try to lower the cost. There's an outstanding question if that's enough, if that's going to get us there, which I don't know, right? And so the question is it worth the staff time and delaying this conversation and putting it back out for if that's the only change that we're willing to make? Because I think that we've heard so clearly from citizens on alley versus curbside, and that's just one that I can't move on.
Actually, just give me a second. I'm trying to figure out, does anyone remember how many large item pickups were allowed? Was it 10? As part of the RFP, was it just 2? 2 per year. 10 extra. Okay, that's what it was. Director DeAndrea, I was trying to prevent you from coming up here, but
Oh, that's right.
Go ahead, Director DeAndrea.
Yeah, it was 2 times per year, and then you were allowed 3 items on a particular list, like furniture, appliances, then 10 plus 10 bags of garbage plus 10 bags or bundles of yard waste for each of those 2 vouchers.
Okay, thank you, Director DeAndre. I actually do
Could
believe.
I ask a question before?
Yep. Go ahead,
If-
Member Anderson.
Thank you. If I remember right, there was one of the RFPs rejected the large item pickup. Was that the lower cost one or the higher cost one? I don't remember.
It was the lower cost one, and yeah, and they suggested that instead of, since we set it up as a voucher program where you call up
Uh-huh.
and have them come out within the next week or so, they suggested instead to have events like at a park or the
That's right.
service center where people would have to bring their items a couple of times a year.
Okay,
instead.
thank you.
Thank you, Director DeAndre. Stating that, Director DeAndre, I do believe that that may bring the price down. It may not get it to the level that we're looking for, but I would like to go back with the recommendations from the committee and see where that gets us to. So I do feel, with all the work that we put into it over 3 years worth, so many, we had KEB, ETAC, the members of CASE, other members of Inglewood that are looking to do this. I still feel that this is worth one shot to see if we get better pricing for it. But that would be my recommendation, just to go with removing the large item pickup. It's hard for me to say no LE pickup, as much as I feel that that's going to get us to the price that we're going to get to. It's really hard for me to say yes to that. Member Russell.
So it doesn't seem to me like yard waste was included in any of the proposals. And so if we do away with that and still have no, even the yard waste at 10 bags twice a year is nothing as far as generating trash. So if people still have to get rid of the yard waste, it's going to create a problem.
Thank you, Member Russell. I'm seeing that yard waste would be included as part of this new RFP. If we were to move forward with an RFP, that would be added as part of the RFP. Mayor Pro Tem.
I'll just note that would drive the cost up, not down. We're adding something which was not included in the original proposal.
I understand that, Mayor Pro Tem. Member Russell, Member Anderson, sorry.
There's one other cost driver would be the recycling. Like if we wanted to get a price option that's lower, to allow citizens to not recycle and ask for 2 price points. That would be worth considering.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Member Woodward.
It's funny, I just lost my train of thought when you went from Mayor Pro Tem to Joe, and then heard something else, and I lost what were you talking about?
Yard waste.
Yard
being
waste.
A driver of
Thank
the cost.
You. That's all I needed. Yard waste, I thought the 10 bags were mainly set up for the idea of fall or something like that, with the 10 bags for leaves and sticks and storms that blow things out of your trees and stuff like that. Not lawn clippings, that sort of thing. Am I correct in believing that that's included like it is right now as part of your regular service? And you can have 2 bags or 3 bags or something like that right next to your canister?
For some providers, yes. The provider I currently have does not include yard waste, although my trash man has been pretty nice about it. So he will occasionally pick up an extra bag for me without griping too much, probably due to the extra 20 I slipped him around Christmas time last year. The committee's recommendation here is mostly aimed at establishing parity with what some of the more common providers in Inglewood currently provide. So not all of the contracts allow for that, but some of them do. And some of the remarkably low-priced contracts provide the level of service that the committee is recommending for yard waste. Although not every vendor in Inglewood currently does provide that as a service.
well, in 44 years of living here and a few different trash haulers, any yard waste I ever put out was always picked up that day. Nothing was ever said as if it was too much or stuff, anything like that. And I have two 60-plus foot trees that drop branches in wind and stick them out there and they're gone. So I would support going back again.
Thank you, Member Woodward. I was just going to ask for a pulse check based off of what we've heard. So if we could just go around the room, I think I'm with former Mayor Woodward on going back and seeking another round of RFPs.
I would like to go back with one more RFP. I'm not so sure if the committee, if it makes sense to go back to the committee for that, or if we can just do an ad hoc right here and a few of us bring it back to council in a week or 2 weeks for approval of what we are doing the RFP on, and then get some answers, put a date to it and get the answers back.
Actually, Member Woodward, I don't even want to go to that extent. I want to keep it as simple as possible and just take the recommendations of the committee and just go with the RFP. If you wanted to clarify, or if City Attorney wanted to jump in on your suggestion, she can, but. So I guess, Member Woodward, did you want to just clarify what your process looked like in terms of just seeking back out the RFP?
My process was, there's a committee of us council members, a few of us, that put something together, that write up the RFP with staff's help on that, and bring it back to the rest of council for approval or changes. Get that new proposal out to the bidders and have a date certain that all bids will be returned by, and then be done with it. We're able to make a decision at that point when they come back.
Thank you, Member Woodward. City Attorney, did you want to?
I'm not exactly sure what you would like for me to weigh in on the legality of that.
Well, yeah, because I guess the way that I'm understanding Member Woodward is that to me sounds like a council meeting, I guess, in a sense, because there's going to be at least, it wouldn't just be 2 council members, it sounds like at least 3. And so to me, the best place to hold that conversation would be here and actually talk about what that RFP would look like. I'm not sure what else we would need to discuss.
So yes, if 3 members of council work together to do it, it would be an open meeting under the Colorado Open Meetings Law. It wouldn't necessarily have to be at the Civic Center, but we would have to provide notice, and it would be open to the public to observe, not necessarily participate, but at least to observe.
Okay. Thank you, City Attorney. Mayor Pro Tem.
I thought we were talking about kicking this back to the single hauler committee, which is something that I would actually strongly recommend against at this point, because the committee has already spoken quite clearly on what they would demand of a future proposal if we were to further engage on the project.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So just a pulse check on where we stand with the single hauler, whether or not stop it as it is, or stop tonight, as Mayor Pro Tem stated, push it to another RFP based off the recommendations of the Citizen Committee, or something in between. Anyone else? Member Anderson?
I'll just say, based on what I'm hearing, it sounds like there's not appetite from council for reconsidering some of these cost driving provisions, and so I'm opposed to going back out for RFPs. I think we just drag the process out and create staff time and another series of long meetings to no purpose.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Member Noonekamp, do you want to weigh in?
Not really. I'll be incredibly candid. This is a really hard decision, and I see benefits on both sides for our community. I see more, in the long term versus the immediate. I'd hate to have invested, there's this idea of sunk costs. Like, we've invested so much time already. I hear the mayor's question about, should we just leave no stone unturned and say that we really explored this to the fullest before we make a final decision? I'm incredibly skeptical that we will get a bid back that meets our criteria, but it is the recommendation of the Citizens Committee that we asked to look at this. It's quite clear. I wouldn't see the need for council to write an RFP. I think the information's right here. We could direct staff to listen to what the citizens have told us. I think at this point, I would like to have some finality on this, and so I am willing to support checking one last time based on citizen input. But to be clear, I am not guaranteeing my support for this. When it comes back, I will have to see what it looks like, but I'm open to at least still exploring.
Thank you, Member Nooncamp. Yeah, this makes it fun. Since this is a study session, we have 3-3 here in terms of how to move forward. There's obviously, we're just trying to provide direction tonight for staff in terms of what to do with single hauler. City Attorney, do you have any suggestions on how to break this tie? Mayor Pro Tem, did you want to speak first before I pass it to City Attorney, or?
I guess the thing that I'm having trouble grasping as I listen to my fellow council members discuss this is what would possibly make us think that a new round of bids would result in an outcome different from the one that we have in front of us right now. In an economy where, as Member Anderson pointed out, fuel rates are increasing, fuel prices are increasing, it's becoming more difficult to provide services because of labor pressure. How would we possibly see a benefit to pushing out a bid and saying, meet our price and add these services? I don't follow that line of reasoning. And that's where I'm having the most trouble, is I see no outcome when I analyze the facts in front of me and what I believe the future would bring, which results from a product, results in a product that is useful for the work that we intend to put into it.
Right.
I don't regret the work that's already been done, and I want to thank the people who participated in the process, and the very idea that the fact that the idea was brought forward is an example of some innovative thinking. But not every new idea is a good idea, and not every new idea is workable for Inglewood. So my issue is, we could drag this out further, we could try again. We've already been told twice. I just don't see any other outcome coming, any positive result coming from asking a third time.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Do you mind if I answer your comment or the way that I'm seeing it? And I wish I would have asked this question to the Republic Services representative when he came and spoke during the public hearing. But the way that I'm seeing it is that we're allowing each household to do 2 large items over the course of the year. So, and I'm thinking back to you, Mayor Pro Tem, when you were trying to get rid of that mattress that was left in your alley. You were charged, they were asking for what, $200 for the mattress or something along those lines, right?
Yeah, it was like $100 a mattress if I took them to the transfer center.
So to me, it's like when you think about a large item, I'm thinking of something like that they're going to be asking for $100, $150, $200 per item. And so removing 4 items of yard waste is not that big of a deal, but removing a mattress is. And if we're putting in there that we're going to require you to remove 2 large items from each household in the city of Inglewood, I do think that's a really large cost driver. 4 bags of waste per week is not a big cost driver for each of the waste management companies. So to me, it is worthwhile to actually go back and just see what it comes back with if we're removing the two items per household in the city of Inglewood. So to me, I think it's worth the shot. Member Russell.
Thank you. I think it's unfair to ask the city attorney to weigh in. If this was a council meeting night, 3-3, it's over. And so I think that those of you who want to move forward, we did it tonight. I think that it's not fair to keep going after us to change our opinion. I appreciate the work that's been done. It's gone on for a long time. I agree with the Mayor Pro Tem. He put it very eloquently. And Member Anderson, in the current economy, there is no way we are going to get a new RFP that is going to be less than the one we've already got. We're wasting staff time, we're wasting our time. I think we probably should move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Russell. And the only reason why I was asking the city attorney is because it's not a city council evening. This is just giving directions. Well, it's a study session, so we're not actually deciding. If there was an item up for ordinance or resolution, it would have been struck down because it was 50-50. But because it's only giving direction, I was seeing if there was anything else that we could do in order to try to break the tie tonight. But Member Anderson.
To me, this isn't a particularly a no forever. I was excited about the idea because I thought it was going to actually bring the price down and reduce the traffic in the alleys, reduce the wear on the alleys and streets, and I'm not seeing those outcomes here. And I think an economy like this is not the place to try it again. So there may be a time in the future when prices come back down and things are better, and we might look at it again. Or I mean, I really love small incremental approaches to things. Maybe it's possible to figure out a way that neighbors could get together and cooperatively, hire a single hauler or something like I would like to hear, what options there are available for that. So I'm not seeing this as a particularly a no forever, but the worst economy we've had in a really long time is just a bad time to be trying to get a better deal. So that's, hopefully sometime down the road we'll figure out a way to get there. I'm not a no forever on single hauler. I know we had a lot of citizens who see this as a freedom issue. I don't quite see it that way, though I understand where they're coming from, but I do see it as a place where we could potentially provide a great benefit and service to our citizens. And the proposals that we have don't do that, and I don't see any path forward in this economy to getting those proposals. So I think for me, it's a pretty hard no for now without the cost driver discussion.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Member Woodward.
Just addressing Mayor Pro Tem's comments on the economy and how things are going up. We're in this pandemic, endemic war economy. A recession is supposedly going to hit in 2023. We've already seen interest rates go up. We've seen mortgage interest rates almost double in 6 weeks. If you watch Zillow or look at Zillow, you're starting to see house prices going down. And I mean, this economy, I feel, is a temporary economy. We're going to rebound from this. It may take some time. It is going to take some time. But I don't know if it's, a month ago, I got a contract, or not a contract, but I got service at $22 a month for trash and recycling. So I'm not so certain that if you bring in a whole city, that you can't do $22 a month or a lot less. As Councilmember Russell said, something like that 13. I don't think you're going to get to 13, but you're going to get somewhere else. And after all the effort and time that's been put into this, I think just one more shot at it is worth it. And I'm not invested like you've been, obviously, or the other members of council that have been here for a while. But I'd sure like to go after it.
Thank you, Member Woodward. We're still right back where we started. We're at 3-3. I think without having a seventh vote, I think that this is kind of where we stand. From what it sounds like to me, it's 3-3. I'm with Member Anderson. It may not be the right time for us to look at single hauler, something that I would like to look at again in the future if it gets to that point, but without seeing, we're deadlocked. It doesn't seem like anybody here is really looking to renegotiate anything here. I think this is something that maybe we put it on a topic like Mayor's Choice in the future and just see if somebody wants to look at it again. But I just don't see a path forward with where we're at as a council right now. So with that being said, I do want to thank everyone that put an effort into looking at the single trash hauler from the many different groups. You know, it went back at least 3 years as far as I know, but you know, a lot of people put a lot of time and effort into this. A lot of staff put a lot of time and effort into this. And so I do want to thank them for trying to do the right thing for the city of Inglewood and trying to bring up the recycling rates, do things, you know, less trucks on the road. So there was real reason to have this discussion. So I'm hoping in the future that we can get back to it. Obviously, I guess COVID kind of bit us on this one in terms of just getting realistic rates, at least that we would be comfortable with. But just want to thank everyone that put effort into this and everybody that's come out and spoken for and against it. You know, we hear you. This is part of the reason why I'm on council. I like making the tough decisions. I like people coming to me and just telling me what it is that they like or don't like about what we're talking about. And this was a big, passionate issue. And if you saw what was going on with other cities that was talking about single hauler, I was expecting this. This was going to be what I expected to hear from the public. So I'm happy that we took up the conversation. Didn't work out as well that I had hoped. I'm a big proponent of single hauler, but just not in the cards tonight. So maybe we'll talk about it in the future, but as of right now, I think that we are all in agreement that maybe we'll talk about it sometime in the future, but not in the near future. So with that, I think we will, Mayor Pro Tem.
I also have just some closing remarks, if I may. I do want to recognize the people who put so much work into this project over the last 3 years, starting from the inception, the community meetings we had, the discussions we had, the communications posts we had, all of the different things that the different departments did. If I may, I'd like to read the list of names of people that I worked with on the single hauler committee as well. Dane Borman, Christine Brinker, Marcy Brown, Carson Green, Kanji Kwanabe, Felicia Labe, Matt Adams, Jeff Frazier, Brenda Hubka, Cheryl Stewart, and myself all worked on this project as committee members. There is, however, one person who did an incredible amount of work on this project, late nights with the committee, engaging with the haulers in various ways, securing the RFP, working on the responses, and that is our Public Works Director, Maria DeAndrea. I would be remiss if I didn't say that I do not consider this to be a failure. I think that this was a worthy investigation. I think we learned a lot about a variety of things, not just trash, but some other things around Inglewood by virtue of engaging in this project. And I really want to thank you, Director DeAndrea, for all the work that you put into this. I know that some nights were better than others, and some nights were more difficult than others. And I took a little bit of that heat myself as chair of the committee during the time that I was chair. So I think we did some good work here. And even though we didn't reach the conclusion that we may have expected at the start, we did learn a lot from the process. And I think it was a worthwhile expenditure of time and energy. That's all I have. Thank you.
Well said, Mayor Pro Tem. Anyone else? And with that, I guess we'll just move on to the next item. But yeah, thank you very much, Director DeAndrea. You did do a lot of work on this and really, really appreciate it. You worked with a lot of citizens on this and brought a lot of information forward. So there's not much I can say that would show my true gratitude for what you put through over the last 3 years. So thank you. And with that, going down a level, now reports for boards and commissions. Does anyone have anything to add about boards and commissions over the past week? The first week is always slow, so Member Noonekamp.
Thank you, Mayor.
The Cultural Arts Commission met this past week to discuss some of their ongoing projects. They have scheduled an artist meet and greet coming up this summer to discuss how we can showcase more local art here in the city. They've also discussed some new homes for some wayward Swedish horses who maybe are no longer safe in their current homes and the out of doors, and so looking to bring them inside to some of our city buildings. And so we're excited to see that move forward, as well as looking at how they can continue to incorporate art into some of the city events that we have coming up, including the block party. So it was a great meeting. We're grateful for everyone who's still on that committee.
Thank you, Member Noonan-Camp. Anyone else? Seeing none, Member Woodward.
Yeah, Melly Trust Fund met a week ago, and we discussed a couple things. We had the expo the Friday before at Malley Center, and we're able to sign up a number of new people at that time, although we didn't have the numbers for the meeting. But we did get more people signed up on the social passes. So the seniors and their social passes were there. We also discussed something that was brought up by a member from the public to me, and I brought it forward, and that was doing a banner about over Broadway regarding the Malley Center. And I think it was kind of left looking into it a little more, but Malley Center, you know, is one of the very first senior centers in the United States. And people feel like it's kind of a secret almost. And so that is the report. That's it.
Thank you, Member Woodward. Anyone for council member's choice? Member Noonan-Camp.
Just want to say a big thank you to all the staff who was at Celebrate Inglewood over the weekend. It was a fantastic event. I love that event because I love getting to see our citizens interface with all the staff that make the city run every single day. It was super fun. And then also for citizens, want to let them know that I'm hosting a community coffee this Wednesday morning at Grow and Gather from 8 to 9:30. So if you have anything on your mind, come grab a cup of coffee.
Thank you, Member Noonan-Camp. Mayor Pro Tem.
Just wanted to follow up on a request we had about a month ago on a possible youth advisory board. I'm not sure I recall the conclusion that council reached, or if we did reach a conclusion, or where that is in the process.
Hi, Tim Doss, Assistant City Manager. City Clerk Carlisle and I have done an initial review of other cities and some best practices, and we're basically just waiting for council direction. If you'd like a study session on it, if you'd like to see some ideas, we're happy to move forward however you'd like. But
I guess that brings up the question of if my fellow council members have an appetite for a study session on that particular topic. I'm in favor personally.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Does anyone want to weigh in on that now? Member Noonan-Camp.
Yeah, I've been vocal of my support for this concept. I think we can have a study session if we think that it's needed. I'd also be in support of just improving it. I think we discussed when we had the citizen comment, maybe for the winter cycle, since this summer cycle is almost upon us. I would like to see this added. But I would be open also to a conversation if other members need more conversation first.
Thank you, Member Noonan-Camp. Member Anderson.
I would like to see a study session on it. I want to hear about the different options on best practices. How many, do you have different age groups? What are the age ranges? All, you know, how big of a committee, all of those kind of things. I have 5 potential members in my household, and so I'd like to have that discussion.
Careful, Member Anderson. I too would want to see it as part of a study session just to talk about scope and all of the items that Member Anderson covered. Perfect. Anyone else for member's choice tonight? Seeing none, I'll move it over to City Manager's choice.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have one item, and it echoes some of the comments that have been made tonight, but I do want to thank Director DeAndre for and just acting with professionalism, guiding us really adeptly and thoroughly through one of the most difficult processes that this council has seen really since I've been here. I think it is the most difficult, and really led us through one of the most prolific and robust public engagement processes, and most importantly, acted with integrity. And so maybe to close the meeting, we can just give her a round of applause.
And that will now conclude tonight's meeting. See you guys next Monday.